the UUA thought it'd be a really good idea to completely disregard the centuries-old tradition of opposing blasphemy laws that Unitarian Universalists held to until June 1st of 2012, when Reverend Dr. Peter Morales ended that tradition. Okay, so everyone's going in, and oh yeah, okay, we've still got some tape here. I'm miscalculating. I thought we were coming to the end of the video. I think we came to the end of a segment, but it's continuing on. So anyhow, maybe lost my train of thought there a little bit, but distracted somewhat by the Montreal Unitarians proceeding into the church. So that means it's 10:30. That's when the service starts. So we'll go for another half hour or so with this protest and this monologue. I didn't used to have a running monologue of my protest, but since Montreal Unitarians pretty much forced me to run video almost constantly to protect myself from false accusations brought against me by Montreal Unitarians, and also to record bad behavior on the part of Montreal Unitarians when it happens, and also to record the interactions with the police that occur when Montreal Unitarians bring false accusations against me and the police show up in response to their calls. I basically found it necessary to keep the video camera running as much as possible to protect myself. Thanks, sir. Got a nice little wave of the fist on the other side of the street there by someone offering their support. So anyway, as I was saying, it's unfortunate in some ways that I am pretty well compelled to record everything, if for no other reason than to protect myself from false accusations made by Montreal Unitarians. I've decided, well, since the camera's running, I might as well, run a monologue explaining things. So at least, if somebody sees the video, they can have a better idea of, what the protest is about. And of course, in recording various discussions with the public, that also is another way of explaining the protest, because when a member of the public asks a question, I can answer it, and so people can have a better understanding of what this protest is about by listening to those conversations between myself and various members of the Montreal public who do stop and ask questions. So anyhow, we'll continue to circulate here. The wind is knocking down my picket signs fairly regularly, but not too often. So we'll keep them there for the time being. It's not at the point where they're being knocked down so much that I just put them away. But anyway, getting back to a part of my monologue that I think I let slip a little bit is the whole issue of the Montreal Gazette never reporting at all on the fact that the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston hired Stikeman Elliott barristers and solicitors litigation lawyer, Maitre Marc-André Coulombe, to falsely accuse me of the archaic criminal act of blasphemous libel for allegedly, and I do say allegedly because it is false, allegedly making unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. And then going on to say that, this is so defamatory that this constitutes the criminal act of blasphemous libel. Well, there's a bit of a problem with the pretext, and that is that my blog posts about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists are by no means unfounded. They are founded on very credible reports in mainstream media about the fact that Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell was charged, tried, and convicted of the forcible rape of teenage Tibetan refugees, and that Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein's parishioner at First Parish Norwell, Richard Buell, was charged, tried, and convicted of the forcible rape of preteen girls, which is why I described him as a pedophile rapist, because he was, in fact, guilty of raping young girls who were no older than 12 years old at the times that the rapes took place, and by some estimates could have been as young as 6 years old, but certainly we're somewhere between 9 and 12 years old when Richard Buell raped them, which makes Richard Buell a pedophile rapist in my estimation, and I believe most people would agree with that description of Richard Buell. He was, in fact, the only Unitarian Universalist who I'd specifically described as a pedophile on the Emerson Avenger blog, but he, to the best of my knowledge, was not actually a Unitarian Universalist minister, so I guess that indicates, some incompetence and sloppiness on the part of Matron Marc-Andre Coulombe in mixing him in with Unitarian Universalist ministers. But the fact is that certain Unitarian Universalist ministers are, in fact, guilty of sexual abuse of children, other than Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell. I did not describe Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell as a pedophile because the teenage Tibetan refugees who he raped were around 16 years old when the rapes began. It's possible they might have been as young as 15, one or two of them, but it was more like 16, and to me that puts him out of the range of pedophilia specifically. My understanding of pedophilia is that it's essentially sexual attraction to or sexual abuse of preteen children who were prepubescent, essentially. And this, I believe, was not the case in terms of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's rapes, which were nonetheless despicable crimes. And essentially what I'm getting to here is that even though Richard Buell was indeed a pedophile rapist, he was not, to the best of my knowledge, a Unitarian Universalist minister. But a certain number of other Unitarian Universalist ministers have, in fact, been charged, tried, and convicted and sentenced to jail terms for sexual abuse of preteen children. Essentially, what people call pedophilia. So that is a fact that is verifiable. Some of these cases of Unitarian Universalist ministers being charged, tried, and convicted of pedophilia, sexual abuse of young children, have been reported in credible mainstream media news sources. So it's possible, if you go looking for it, to find this, although to be honest, in terms of what's available online is quite limited. Even in terms of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, the information that's available on the internet, other than of course my own blog posts, is actually quite limited, and some of it doesn't even identify him as a Unitarian Universalist minister. So some of the online blog posts about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell raping teenage Tibetan refugees. Well, they identify him by name, but they don't identify the denomination he was with. So unless you know his name, you're not going to make the connection to Unitarian Universalism. Anyhow, what I'm getting at is that you basically have to go to sources of information that are not available online to get more detailed information about this. You have to go to newspaper databases that are available in university libraries and that kind of thing. And of course, you could go to court records and this and that. But the Unitarian Universalist Association, has been quite successful in keeping these things hidden in various ways. So for every case you may be able to, find some information about, you can be sure that there are others that have been kept hidden by Unitarian Universalists. You can be quite sure that, not every Unitarian Universalist minister who's a pedophile or rapist, or indeed combination of both, is known about in terms of publicly available information. And indeed the Unitarian Universalist Association, as I understand it from very credible sources who know about these things, so Unitarian Universalist ministers and so on. Essentially, the Unitarian Universalist Association habitually insisted on signing confidentiality agreements with clergy sexual misconduct complainants. They actually refused to deal with their complaints unless they signed a confidentiality agreement. So many people were, compelled or coerced or tricked or whatever into signing